Well, we're going to start now. Hello,
Okay.
everyone. Thank you for coming to the CMU International Film Festival's live discussion event for America Street. My name is Caleb Chandler. I am a coordinator for America Street, and I will be helping to moderate today's discussion. Before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. Today's event is being recorded, and by joining us, you are agreeing to having your participation recorded, as we will have this video posted to our website for future references. Also, to make sure this event functions smoothly, all of your microphones will be muted throughout the discussion. If you would like to speak, please use the raise hand function on the bottom bar of the screen. For those unfamiliar with Zoom, you can find this by clicking on the participant tab. You can also write comments using the chat function, also located on the bottom of your screen. We will have a Q&A at the end where you can ask questions and provide comments. To keep things fluid, we do ask that you hold off on questions until then for the Q&A. Again, you may use the raise hand function and I will then unmute you and the floor will be yours. If you prefer not to speak, please write a question in the chat box at the time and I will ask the question on your behalf. I would now like to introduce you to tonight's facilitator. Waverly Duck is an urban sociologist and associate professor of sociology at the University of Pittsburgh. He is an author whose work has won numerous awards and his current research involves several projects focusing on gentrification, displacement, and challenges faced by marginal groups. So with that, Waverly, I will throw it to you.
Thank you, Caleb. I am beyond thrilled and honored to have this opportunity to engage Idrissou Mora-Kpai, who is the director, the filmmaker for American Street. But before I get started, I want to acknowledge the work and the time, and the Carnegie Mellon University International Film Festival is one of my favorite things about Pittsburgh. So I want to say thank you to Yolanda Lyon for putting this together and her amazing staff who have been utterly gracious. I also want to thank all of you for coming, especially in the midst of a pandemic. I know these are difficult times, but it really feels great to see so many wonderful faces, friends, and people, not only in the Pittsburgh community, but across the country. So I'm grateful and I want to thank you. I want to jump into it because Idrissou Mora-Kpai is an award-winning filmmaker, assistant professor at Ithaca College, but I'm going to, guide the conversation. I have sort of three sets of questions, and then we'll open it up to the group. And, my curiosity is one about the process of making a documentary film and the work that goes into it and the power of the camera. My second question is about the subject, not only the people, but the place. And then my last question sort of deals with the sort of historical context, the significance of Charleston in the midst of the Black Lives Matter movement, the Walter Scott killing, and the tragedy that happened at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church. So with that being said, and I'm going to call you Idrissou, even though I know you as Idris. But my first question is, American Street is such a fitting and literal title for this film, but why this story? And particularly why Joe Watson's story in the east side of Charleston? Can you take us through that particular, why you're telling this particular story?
Thank you very much. I thank you, all of you, for coming. And so I'm really thankful to have all of you here. I imagine you watch the film and taking your time really to be here and hear what we're going to discuss. It's fantastic. So America Street, America Street, the title came after the film, after the screening. The title, I had another working title, but after the editing, it was clear for me to take this title, the new title, America Street, because of what is happening nationwide. And also because of the location of the film, right? This particular place, this corner store, right? That was located exactly on America Street. And another important thing is that Charleston is the only one city in the United States with street called I didn't know that. So I discovered that during the editing. And there's no other city in America with a street called America Street. You have American Street, but America Street is nowhere, it's only in Charleston. So that was, for me, one of the motivation, I mean, to call the film America Street. And so why this story? And I used to live in Charleston from 2013 until 2015. And as you know, I'm from West Africa, originally from West Africa. And I have also European, background. I came here to the United States 9 years ago. And in 2013, I found myself in Charleston without knowing anything about the city, without knowing the story of the city. And so I discovered a different, let's say, being in Charleston, I had this kind of feeling, divided feeling, let's say that, really torn between two different feelings, the love of the city, this beautiful city, this nice architecture. But at the same time, I was repulsed by what was happening in the city. The racial relationship, the racialized nature of social inequality, in the city. So I knew there was a film to be done there, and I didn't know how to start. And but every day, each day, the desire to make in the city increased, and until I met Joe Watson. When I met Joe, it was clear for me he was the character of my film. What he was able to share with me in a very short time, his feeling, his dedication to the community, and also the corner store, the location of this corner store was important for me, for a documentary filmmaker like me. The corner store, this corner store, which was the heart of the community, where everything happened. For me, there was no best connection place if I want to enter to tell a story from the inside, there was no better place like this corner store. And in addition to Joe's character, Joe is, as you know, he's part of this community. He grew up there, and he loved the people in the community. He loved them, and he's, willing to lose everything for his community. And everybody know him. Anything that happened in the community, Joe was the first person to be informed. So I was able, in a couple of hours, to notice that. And I said, that is the place. That is the location to start with. And that is the character for me as a documentary filmmaker, because I was able to connect so easily with him. So that's where the idea of America Street is coming from. So I started shooting. Joe was thinking that I just want to make an interview with him. And once I'm done with the interview, so the film is done. So we spent the entire day talking about himself, his life. And when we are done, I said, oh, I'll come the next day. He said, he was surprised why I'm coming back the next day. So I said, no, actually, I'm interested in the community, and not only him, but he was part of the film, but also the community. And I want to meet also other people from the community. I want to see how the community work together. I say, oh, okay, that's no problem. You can come back. So that's how I kept filming for about 3 months. And and so many things happen, as you know, you can see in the film, while shooting, Walter Scott got killed by the police officer. And toward the end of the shooting, the massacre in Emmanuel Church has happened. So for me, it was important to get all these elements in the film, because that was what the film is about. Walter Scott's killing is what people know, what we hear every day here nationwide. But what generates this violence is not known, is not documented. And being with Joe allowed me to explore what institutional racism means. What these people like Joe are dealing with for this slow violence, right? So I couldn't ignore this spectacular violence, the killing of Walter Scott, with what the community is going through for years, right? This slow violence, the institutional racism, a problem that dealt with education. So many aspects in African American life in Charleston. Right. So, Waverly, can you guide me again with follow-up of the question? Yeah.
And so I guess, in line with that, there's something about Joe Watson that, he has this expert knowledge about the community, and he understands the disparities, he understands the economic crises, he understands the challenges that people are having, but also he's extremely empathetic and thoughtful.
Exactly.
And what fascinates me about this, and particularly you as a filmmaker, and I was wondering if you can speak to this, like how are narratives about Black Americans, especially given that your work as a filmmaker, somebody who records, illustrates, captures, you live Blackness, and you've been throughout the diaspora, whether in Benin, whether in France, whether in Germany, whether in the UK, and in different parts of the United States. How does this narrative fits into the rendering of not only Black life, but also Black American life? And can you speak to sort of the connective tissue of the African diaspora as you're telling the story? Because even someone, that I was raised in the Midwest, but my family, came through, my father's fathers, his ancestors came through South Carolina, and so there's I'm curious, as someone who's experienced Black life throughout the world, what is it about, what is the thing that connects the diaspora and that you see in this film and making it and telling that story?
Yeah, it's apart from my my personal connection to the city, which I said, being a West African, who came to Charleston because also of the connection Charleston has with West Africa. That's most of the people in Charleston from African descent from West Africa, right? And there's no other place here in the United States that is still connected, has a close connection to West Africa than Charleston, right? You have the Gulagishi culture that's very connected to West Africa. And, when that was this part that attracted me first, right? Seeing people, in the city, you can imagine that maybe they are Senegalese, they are from Benin, they are from, so that's how I felt first when I met people there. I was, like, oh, he could be someone I knew, I met in Benin or in Dakar in Senegal or someone like that. So, I have this connection. I mean, also the same connection in different places here in the United States. For me, as a documentary filmmaker, I'm interested in aspect that has to do with the critical part of that. Right. I mean, beyond the DNA, the connection, the DNA connection to the people, it's also the experience we share, right? As an African and every person of African descendants, right? You have here in the United States, the legacy of slavery, right? That keeps going, that keeps affecting people's life. And we, West African and Africans in general, we have also kind of a legacy of colonialism, right? That still go, you know, we are still affected by that, by this, you know, you can see worldwide, people from African descendants are still this body, this exploited body, right? We nourished the global capitalism worldwide. You can see it here, you see it in Africa, even though the countries in Africa are independent, you know, we still have a people independent, they call independent, you know, people, if, you know, run by Africans by itself, but it was kind of Africans, right? It's African that who work for this global economy, you know, and also violence. We are talking about police violence here. Okay, police violence here, we see it as white against black. In Africa now, it looks like a black against black police violence. But the system work, you know, in the same, you know, for the same purpose. You know, in Africa, the politician in Africa work for whom? For the global economy, you know, and they're using police against their own people, right? So we have here a system that continue want to pursue also this exploitation of black body here. You know, that's what I saw in Charleston too, because you have the people. Most African Americans, you know, who are working and have low-paying jobs, for instance, you see with, you know, the situation, the social condition. It's for me, there's no big change. It's just slavery has just been modified, but it's still there. It's still there. Right, it has another name. You know, they say they are free, but I don't see this freedom today. It's just another form of slavery, right? So that connect us worldwide, you know. So if you see all of my film, it's about that. You know, my film Arlit, which was about the uranium mining in Africa by French companies or multinational companies in the country, with one of the poorest country in Niger, which is a Niger in Africa, that export uranium for the most powerful country, company in the world, right? Company that make billions of profit every year. And you see only 25% of people in Niger that have electricity. And 70% of France electricity comes from uranium. So that's all about that, right? So for me, what I'm seeing in Charleston, the history of Charleston, the development of history, the legacy of slavery, and the legacy of colonialism are very connected. So that's how I see it. And that's also one of the points I want to, for perspective, I wanted also to bring into this narration, even though the life of Joe is drives my story. You can see all this story that goes along with the narration.
I'm going to sort of share a personal story to set up this next question, because there's so much in this film, and Charleston is one of the oldest American cities, and it is so significant in how we think about the history of race and racism in this country, the legacy of slavery. There's a scene in the film where Joe Watson is watching the news, and he's watching the Walter Scott killing.
Yeah.
And on his refrigerator, which is, as you pointed out, it's almost like a history of Black life. But there's a picture of George Stinney Jr., who was the youngest person ever executed in modern time in the United States, a 14-year-old boy who was later, the conviction was overturned, but he was given the electric chair in the 1940s. And it's on Joe's refrigerator as he's watching this. And then it hits me, and we talked about this, the significance of Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church as the bedrock church of the Black community. If there's a Black church, the AME church would be in that canon. But also it is, founded by Denmark Vesey, who, was significant, but for that killing to happen in that place, so you have this sort of this history of violence.
And it's a kind of sex. Yeah.
My question is, and I think what, even though it was, I cried, but there were also tears of joy in terms of how did you balance this story? How did you balance, it could have, and what I mean by that, it could have been easily a story about, Black oppression, Black suffering, but in the face of all of this, you have not only the children who have a level of grace and pride, you have the people in the community who understand and have a consensus about the history and what's going on in that community. How did you balance, telling a very relatable story that humanizes everyone in this community in the face of tragedy and violence in Charleston?
Yeah. So, I mean, from the beginning, it was clear for me, I didn't want to portray the community as victims of something, right? Even though, this part was important. For me, the agency was very important to find, this resilience, right, from the community was important. How people like Joe are struggling and fighting and doing what they can to survive, in the middle of oppression, right? So that's really important for me. I mean, you can say many film. The easiest way to do this kind of subject is to portray them, as a victim. That was not my goal. I want my character in the story to be driven by a strong character like Joe, people who has a vision, who are fighting to reach this goal, right? So, and also to tell the story with pictures, and that's my job as a documentary filmmaker, not to be to let everything told by dialogue, to find element pictures that connect things, right? Like this scene you just mentioned, and we are talking about violence. How can I connect this violence with history? For instance, it was, this cycle, right? That's still going on, right? You see this boy and what is happening in the monitor, which actually was the violence in Baltimore, and connected it with the violence in Charleston. In Charleston, there was three different elements in just one picture, right? You see, 70 years ago, this boy has been condemned, and then 2015, there was still the same violence going on. So how can I tell this? How can I convey this idea without saying that, using a word. So that has been also my concern. But I was in a place, in a location that's where everything was set for me. I just needed to have this feeling and the sense to discover them and connect them. All this happening really in a couple of minutes, to see, you just, set your camera and on the frame, you see things, you say, wow, you need to take a decision right away to connect this element. So that's what's happening, has happening with this frame. And Joe as a character, and this place, it's more than even what I show for the place. As you can see, just see the fridge. The fridge is not just a fridge. The fridge is like a museum. Everything that happened in Charleston concern with Black life, any article, journal, that happened, that concerned Black life, Joe will cut it and just fix it to this phrase. So that's, for him, it's also the occasion, the opportunity to talk with people, his client, when the client come in. The client, curious client who come in will comment, and Joe is always ready to talk about. He can talk hours about one aspect. Right. See that, and so many things I couldn't show with just one film, right? And to see how important people like Joe are, their work, this frontline worker like Joe, for me, it was very, very important. People don't talk too much about it, but the contribution in the society is huge, right? Imagine this community without Joe, without someone like Joe, right? Imagine all the kids, as Joe said, all the kids who in this community. So, and I mean, I want to continue talking about gentrification, because I returned to Charleston 4 years after this shooting, and I discovered a different neighborhood. So many left this neighborhood. I was really depressed to see that, how many people left this neighborhood. So imagine the effect, the consequences of gentrification on these kids' life. The kids you saw in the film, most of them are not anymore are not living anymore in the same place. So imagine them, their community where it's gone. It's gone.
Well, I want to thank you for not only telling the story, but I want to take this time, I'm going to turn it over to Caleb so that we can take questions from the audience. And so I'll go for there. But thank you for this amazing opportunity to not only engage you, the work,
thank you,
but also this beautiful piece of storytelling, documentary filmmaking, but also highlighting these very beautiful human stories and capturing a moment in time that I think is, illustrates not only the moments that we're living in right now, but also tells a story about a Southern place that we often don't get to hear about. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to you both.
Yeah.
And with that, we are going to head into our Q&A session. So again, with this, on the bottom toolbar in the participant tab, you can click on that and you can press raise hand. And with that, if you raise your hand, I will come to you and I will unmute you and you will be able to speak. Again, if you do not want to speak, you can also put your question into the chat box and I will address it for you. So we will start that. To start off though, there was a question sent in by Gary Carrington. His question is, the movie is an awesome depiction and revealing account of what's occurring across our nation as BIPOC people are being displaced in major cities and have little to no awareness that these insidious plans are going on. What are strategic ways to increase BIPOC voices and counter this element of systematic racism that is ravaging so many communities? Also, can we work with lawmakers, especially the Black Caucus and political parties, to stem the tide and make this an issue of relevance?
I don't know, Waverly, do you want to?
Do you want me to repeat that? Or
Yeah, yes, please.
Okay, it's kind of a long one. So, what are strategic ways to increase BIPOC voices and counter this element of systematic racism that is ravaging so many communities? Also, can we work with lawmakers, especially the Black Caucus and political parties, to stem the tide and make this an issue of relevance?
Okay, so this was a question I had for Idrissou, and I think I'll kick it off, and then maybe he could speak to this. One of the things that, as a college professor and just someone who engages with young people who are changing the way that I think, is the power that they have in terms of not only their use of social media, but even the power of the camera, of how they've changed the narrative in terms of capturing, inequality and putting it on center stage. And of course, our social media platforms are not democratic spaces, but there are these spaces where people have a voice who didn't historically have a voice. In terms of shaping the political landscape, I think it's not only, going out and voting and, organizing around an issue or a topic, or even running for office becomes significant, but also, holding people accountable. And so I think, when I was watching the film, and maybe Idrissou can speak to this, it is the power of, your body, your eyes, your voice, your drive to sort of change a narrative. And I think so many people are responsive to this younger generation, whether it's, generation, I think they're calling people Generation Z and millennials, but so powerful in terms of their access to information and technology. And so saying this all to say, I think, being able to use the tools at hand, but also to shape the narrative. And I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, so it's interesting because that was part of your question. I miss it actually. How important it is for the world really to get to know the perspective of everyone, every constituent of this world, right? And I came to filmmaking actually to fill this void, actually, right? That's it has always been my concern, right? So the world has been told just from one perspective for years, and then now we have a new technology that allowed everyone the way we see the world today. That if every community member can now take a camera and tell the story from their own perspective, right? How important is it? Now, beyond that, you can see today, without this new technology, we don't have Walter Scott, we don't have George Floyd, we don't have what has happened newly in France. People who are making their own media, democratization, allowed us to correct the images, to correct certain representation. That's really essential, right? I always say that it's a gift. I have a friend who said that new technology has allowed a certain group of people to who have been, back for 100 years. To take, you can see, communities here, the First Nations, who now can make a film and tell the story from their own perspective. So that's really important. And for me, especially for me as a documentary filmmaker, it's essential, right? That was my motivation from the beginning, right? So I'm not I'm, even though my film are are political, I'm not political political, working with politicians, so I don't, and then I'm not aware, I don't know a lot about American politics, so I cannot talk about how we can work with politicians. So that's not, I'm not able to talk about this aspect.
Thank you. So we do have a couple of questions that came in that can kind of piggyback off each other. So starting off, how did the filmmaking start? And then what resources did you have available to you, such as a camera? Did you have money? And what about a crew?
Oh, yeah. This film, America Street, was first experience working in this way. All my films has been a well-written project. That was the first time I'm working in that way, right? Where you have been taken to somewhere where you don't know where you were going to, right? As I said, Joe, all I had was my camera and the character Joe and the location, right? So I could feel that there was a story there, but I couldn't tell you what kind of story I was, trying to tell, right? So that's, it's sometimes interesting, but it's very tricky, really, to work in this way, where you don't have a concept. I didn't have a concept. I just have an idea and the character and the place, right? So this film, the mean I had for this film was just a camera. I had a camera, and that's it. That's why also the film took so long to be finished, right? So thanks to the different organizations in Pittsburgh that allowed me to finish the film, to finance the post-production. So otherwise I couldn't have done the film. Making a film is one thing, but finishing the post-production is half important than the shooting, So I finished the film, I finished the shooting, and I didn't know how to continue. So I needed money for that, and the different organizations, Pittsburgh Foundation, Advancing Black, Heinz Foundation, all these organizations from Pittsburgh, allowed this film to become true, right? So I'm thankful for that.
So let's go do have somebody with a raised hand. So Roger Rouse, you can unmute yourself and you can go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. I'll try and be as quick as I can. First of all, thank you so much for the film. Incredibly powerful and moving in any context, but particularly, of course, in the light of recent developments. I want to begin with another death that you haven't touched on yet, but I want to then move to different kinds of activism. The death, of course, is that of Muhyiddin, the young activist that we see. And, I was very upset to learn of that, alongside, of course, all the others. It seemed to me that one of the things your film does is juxtapose different kinds of activism. There's the quiet, continuous kind that Joe does, and there's the more sort of confrontational kind that Muhyiddin does. And I wondered if you could talk about whether or not they actually worked together, what they felt about one another's kinds of activism, what lessons have been taken from Muhyiddin's work in the wake of his death, because I know it was much talked about in Charleston. So I could go on, but if you could say something about the relationship between the two of them personally, but more generally about the relationship between different kinds of activism seeking to address very similar problems.
Really, that's a great point, really. And also that was the question for me at the beginning, you know, and I mean, you mentioned this really rightly, how this different approach of activism between Joe's activism and Muhyiddin. I was very saddened by the passing of Muhyiddin, because he was a young, promising activist in Charleston, and you know, the first time I met him, I know, wow, that's someone to oppose, not to oppose, but to contrast with Joe's, right? That was, you know, my motivation from the beginning, and I even provoked Joe to tell me what he think about Muhyiddin, for instance, right? That's part of my film that I didn't edit it, right? So what do you think about Muhyiddin? And he so nicely, you know, that's the Joe, and he was able to show me the difference between he, and he's not excluded. He doesn't, I mean, exclude anybody who wants. And Muhyiddin is more, as you said, confrontative, right? That's for me, it was important to show these two generations of activists, you know, to see and to show Joe, who is a more quiet and more Joe is open to anyone who is, you know, want to fight. I mean, it's not racial for Joe, this fight of activists. It's anyone who is for justice. It's invited. I mean, Muhyiddin also. I mean, no one is. They are all fighting for justice. It's approach, right? So, yeah, I have recorded Muhyiddin so many times, and that at some point I thought he could dominate Joe. That's why I only use part of his intervention that can contrast better Joe's intervention in the film, and to also, I mean, Muhyiddin's background, that's interesting, because he was born in the North. He was born in New York, and he came back to Charleston with another temperament that is different from the people of Charleston. You know, he was trying to mobilize the people, young people in the city, but at the same time has a lot of difficulties, you know, gathering young people like him. You know, I can feel it. He never, I mean, did not tell me that, but I could feel it, right? So it's that was not only Muhyiddin who has this approach in the film. You can see also the Jerome, the guy who has two daughters, and you know, in Chicago, right? He's also kind of confrontative, right? Like that. So I try to put them together with Joe, for instance, Jerome and Joe, who has a different approach in, you know, in activism. That went really bad. It was also the way I expected, because they are different. They are different, and the way they see. For instance, Joe collaborate with the mayor of the city. You know, he is not excluding the mayor of the city, for instance. He believed that the mayor, dialogue can solve any problems. That's Joe, right? He can convince the mayor about the problem, but if you exclude them from the beginning, you will never reach what you want to reach. You know, so, and then you have a younger generation who say, these people will never think about us. We never solve our problem. You don't have to exclude them. We have to include them in our fight, right? So that's really the main, the main difference, right? So it says, it's sad really to hear. I was very sad, when I heard as Muhyiddin passed away. That's a big loss for Charles Ray, because he was really about to change the mentality of the young people. Not only, young black people, but also young white people, right? To think differently, because this movement is not just a movement, it's not a racial movement. When Black Lives Matter in 2015, that was my the first time I heard about Black Lives Matter. And that was in Charleston through, Muhyiddin, and it was, despised really by the mainstream media in the nation, right? And today I can see what happened. Black life, the violence hasn't changed. There's nothing really that's changed. The violence, the killing is still the same. But what's changed, what's really went in the right direction, it's that this movement today became so big. It's not anymore a Black movement, but it's a movement for everyone who is for justice, worldwide, right? Worldwide, not only here. You can see in France, people are now, branding, showing Black Lives Matter, sign for justice. So for me, we didn't contribute. You can, there are many scenes on the television when you can see Muhyiddin. There was a very famous scene. I don't know if it was CNN or there was where he took this flag.
Confederate flag?
Yeah, Confederate flag away from, that was one of the scene I kept reading the image. It's courageous, to do that, right? So that's for me, Muhyiddin, and that's this new movement, right? And that's travel worldwide. Even in Africa today, people are showing the sign of Black Lives Matter. Can you imagine it? That's for me the big change. The change really in the right direction since 2015 and 15. Right? You can see in Pittsburgh, you can see here and also where here in Ithaca, how many young people you have, even from different color, from different races, who now part of the movement, right? So I believe we are all in the right direction, even though we still have to go through difficulties. But we understand that justice for all is the right things to fight for. Right.
Thank you. So it looks like we have time for maybe one more question. And on the topic of change, this question came in from Thomas. He said, "This film reminds me so much of Steve McQueen's latest film, Mangrove, from his film series Small Axe. Both films are deeply rooted in the survival of Black people through community and community advocacy. The stories in both pieces are the foundation for change in their respective communities. How do you think your film, like the stores, can be an agent and catalyst for change?"
Thank you. Even though our goal is to change the society, it's difficult to say that my film is changing radically people's mind. So we just oppose a element, opinion, and then up to the community, up to the world to see if they are convinced or no by what you are. Yeah. So I don't have this pretension that I want to, I have the power to change anything, but I just show what is unjust, what is not right. So I know many people are not doing this because they are bad. They are just not aware of what is happening. There are many people and not a, we, for instance, racism, I'm sure that many people are not racist, right? So not doing anything against is also kind of responsibility we have, right? It's not enough to say, I'm not racist, I'm fine. So what are you doing against racism? That's the most important question, right? So for me, this kind of film is it's a mirror for everyone to say, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. So if I knew this, I should have, taken another decision. I should have done this differently, right? If the film can convince each of us, to look at ourselves, to say, oh, what can I do against this? And not just staying there, but being in action. It's very important. So that's really very important. It brings me to this very important sentence by Angela Davis, who say, in a racist world, it's not it's not enough to be non-racist, but we must be anti-racist. What that means, being anti-racist? It's that. What can you do in your small environment? In your small environment to change things, right? Because being in a kind of comfort and say, okay, I'm not racist, I'm fine. But you are profiting from institution and many things that create that harm of many other people. You are not aware of that, right? So if you are aware that if you are good, it's because you have part of a society who are, are living in a kind of injustice, then, so for me, it's important. If I can change the film can change the mind of a couple of people. You cannot, a couple of people is enough, a couple of people, right? And each of us, up to, each of us can do that, to convince other people, a small group of people to change their mind, to moving from not being active, into being active, then we reach our goal. So that's for me the most important message. And as a filmmaker, that's what we want to reach, right? I don't want anybody to say, I'm not waiting for that to say that's great. But if the film can travel and convince the world, that's fine. Okay.
Thank you so much. So with that, I think we're going to start wrapping up this discussion. But before I do, Idrissou and Waverly, are there any last comments you would like to say?
Idrissou, this exceeded expectations, and I'm just really honored to have had the opportunity to not only engage you, but also the work. And I jokingly told you, like, I want to be a filmmaker now, but I see how hard you're working. So we're just going to put that on the shelf. But thank you. And thank you, Caleb, for all the work you put into this process as well. And Yolanda, I adore you as well. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to thank everyone here really for your time and for really your interest in this topic. It's very important for us after so many years working on a film, and to be part of this conversation that goes beyond the film. That's actually one of the goal as a filmmaker. That's one of, we say, recompense, for the hard work. And thank you, Jolanta, really for organizing this. That's really great. Really.
Wonderful. Yeah, and echoing both of them, thank you so much for coming out and joining our live discussion. And thank you, Idrissou and Waverly, for both taking your time to come speak with us. So also thank you to Dietrich College Computing Services for helping. If you are interested in hearing more about the filmmaking process behind the scenes, please check out our Carnegie Mellon Film Festival podcast. You can find that through the e-blast that we sent out and also on the website. Also, please be on the lookout for a survey regarding tonight's event in the coming days. Your responses really do help us make improvements for future films in our new virtual format for this year. America Street will be available to view until December 6th. So if you have not seen it yet, or if you just want to go back and rewatch it after tonight's discussion, you have until then. And I believe that you can watch it multiple times as well. So again, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we hope that you carry these important discussions moving forward.
Thank you.